Welcome, my fellow seekers. So today we're going to talk about 5 ways to show God exists through nature. Now, of course, I got this from Thomas Aquinas, who has his 5 ways to show God exists. But I'm taking a different route, one that's more, say, well, for the most part, more modern. So let's just dive right in. What are these 5 ways? 1. Specified complexity. 2. Fine-tuning and foresight. 3. Beauty. 4. Rationality and coherence. And 5. The argument from motion, which is kind of cheating, but we'll get to that. So for specified complexity, first of all, if you want more information, check out my previous video on intelligent design for more information. It was an interview between me and another person, That Christian Nerd, and he asked me questions. I pretty much explained most of what you'll need to know if you want to go there and check it out. Now, while this term was not coined by William Dembski, he kind of championed the concept. It was used before him, including by atheists, actually. But whenever he started using it, formulating the way he did, and really making it into a fuller concept, people abandoned the idea. But it's continued to grow anyway. Now, what is meant by specified complexity? Specified refers to short description length or functionality. Now, short description length actually corresponds to a mathematical principle, an equation, and all this other stuff that I'm not really going to get into. So it's actually a mathematical concept. And if you want to know more about that, well, you can read his book, which we'll get to in a second. Now, complexity refers to improbability, just the unlikeliness of something happening. What you really need to prove is that something is more improbable than the probabilistic resources. Probabilistic resources refers to the amount of time or chances something has had to happen. So let's say I need to flip. Someone comes up to you and says, I flipped 10 heads in a row. Oh, cool, dang, how long did it take for you to do that? Oh, it only took me 20 tries. Well, not really. That's very unlikely. So that just didn't happen. And so, but if you want to get more technical and more, like, really excludatory, I guess, I don't know if that's a word, but you want to exclude anything, it'd be more improbable than 1 in 10 to the 150. The reason for that is in my video, my previous videos, just go check that out. Together, both of these show design, not one or the other, but both. Now, there is no example of specified complexity, at least that I know of, and if you do know that, if you know of one, please tell me, that has been shown to have been produced by nature. Here's some examples of specified complexity. DNA in the first life. So DNA is what you call specified information, as shown by Stephen Meyer. Now, science has shown that at minimum, one would need about 318,000 nucleotide bases in order for something to be minimal and still self-reproduce and exist. However, actual experiments have made the simplest DNA that is still in an organism that can reproduce and function on its own, and it was over 500,000 base pairs. Therefore, we need 500,000 very precisely arranged nucleotides that produce a function. As Meyer discusses in his book, he explains that there is nothing that would encourage certain nucleotides coming together in a certain sequence. Therefore, it has to be completely up to chance. That means that it is 1 in 4 to the over 500,000th power chance that it would come together. That is above the probabilistic resources and above the 10 to 150th power. Therefore, it has specified complexity. The next would be the first life. That one, it is irreducibly complex because one has a function, or at least everything in it has a function, and even it has a function in its environment, as all life does. It's called the niche. But it's also very unlikely, as Meyer and others have actually done the math, and it's very unlikely, way past the probabilistic resources. Next one I'll give is the flagellum. Now, this was quote-unquote debunked in that it shows that it comes from everything in the flagellum comes from other parts of the cell, or at least could, and that they could have other functions. However, the evolution is not actually necessarily against specified complexity, nor specified complexity against evolution. It's more against Darwinism, the idea that there was no God behind it. So sure, maybe it could develop, but the fact that it is specified and complex shows that it is designed. And lastly, we'll go through the Cambrian explosion. And the 2 principal ones is the trilobite and the brachiopod, both of which are extremely complicated in their anatomy, and they're specified that they both had a function in their environment, that being the niche. And there's also the improbability, which is, I don't have the math, but very improbable to come about, because even the DNA is unlikely for 500,000. Add a lot more than 500,000, plus the proteins, plus the organs, and it's way past even the first life, and therefore couldn't have come about naturally. Now, here's some good resources on this. One, Stephen Meyer's Signature in the Cell. This is probably the best, the one I would recommend above all else. He goes into DNA, he goes into the first life, and he goes into intelligent design. And he talks about the court cases, he talks about what other people have said about it, some objections, he talks about why it works and what it is, and he does it in a very good way. Next one is Darwin's Doubt by Stephen Meyer. This would be the Cambrian explosion. He goes into intelligent design on a lesser scale than he does in Signature in the Cell, but he still goes through it some, so I would still recommend it if you want to know more about that, especially if you want to know about the Cambrian explosion. Next one is Your Design Body, which kind of goes into specifying complexity, but mostly talks about just how complicated the body is and how complicated reproduction is, and how in various ways it shows design in a systems engineer way, because one of them, I think it's Steve Loftman, is actually a systems engineer, and the other one's a doctor. And so they put their ideas together and came up to show how it shows design. Lastly, if you really want to know the math behind everything and specify complexity, you should look at William Dembski and Winston Ewert's The Design Inference, second edition. That's the second edition. And the only reason why this is on the bottom is because it is extremely hard to read and is very advanced. And so if you want to take the time to read it, feel free. I've read most of it. And it is very hard, but go ahead. Finally, we're going to go through, for each of the 5 ways, we're going to go through God's character that can be shown through those ways. One, he's creative. He created life. And we all know how complicated and amazing life is. And that makes him very creative. I mean, you look at dogs, and then you look at snakes, and then you look at birds, and you look at people. Very creative. 2, he was intelligent. If you look at the intricacies of the body of all life, including flowers, that was in one of the previous slides, you will find that it is very, very specific, and it takes an intelligent person just to know it, let alone create it. And lastly, he's personal, meaning he has the ability to make libertarian freedom, meaning he has the freedom to choose. The next way that God demonstrates his existence through nature is through the fine-tuning of it. Now, the parameters for life and the constants and the physics of the universe fit so well within an extremely small margin that they must have been fine-tuned. If there was fine-tuning, there must have been a fine-tuner. Now, there's about 140 different aspects of the universe that are fine-tuned for life. One example would be strong force, another would be weak force, another example would be electromagnetism, gravity, the ratio to a gravity-electromagnetism, and tons of others I can't even get into. But there's 3 explanations of why the universe is so fine-tuned. 1, chance, 2, necessity, and 3, design. Now, before we try to rule out which one's which, we have to realize that the universe coming into existence for life, it looks like foresight. It looks like planned, like it's planned. We are planned. So the fact that it's foresighted, vetoes chance and necessity automatically and points to design, because chance can't foresight anything, and necessity doesn't foresight anything either. However, even without considering that, probability works against chance, and that it is extremely unlikely. Therefore, we shouldn't even look at chance at that point. And the next one for necessity, there's just no evidence that the universe had to come into existence anyway, so why would we believe it? And lastly, there's design, which foresight would point to begin with. And in fact, atheists actually recognize that probability works against chance, therefore they come up with the multiverse. Now, the multiverse is a bad explanation for 2 reasons. First, Occam's razor. Now, Occam's razor is a philosophical tool and idea used all the time in science, history, philosophy, and just daily life. It states that all things being equal, the theory or hypothesis with the least amount of entities is probably the most likely one. And so in this example, let's just take out all the other arguments for God. And let's just say that it's equal that either God exists or that there's a multiverse, because those really are the 2 explanations that fit the best. Now, the multiverse posits that there is literally an infinite amount of universes, or at least near infinite amount of universes, to explain how we just happen to get lucky. The God explanation has 1, or really 2, I guess, the universe and God. Obviously, one's more likely than the other just by that principle alone. And second, you have to ask who started the multiverse. We're going to get into that more with the argument from emotion, but suffice it to say that the universe needs an explanation. Now, people are going to say, well, who created God? That's a very bad argument. One of the worst arguments, in my opinion. And the reason is because the argument isn't that everything that begins, or everything that exists needs a creator. So everything that begins needs a creator. God never began, according to actually multiple lines of reasoning, one of which we're going to go through here. But nonetheless, we can get that in another video if you would so like me to do. Just tell me in the comments. A good resource on this would be Hugh Ross. He wrote The Creator and the Cosmos. I would highly recommend that. Now, what of God's nature can be deduced from this? One, he's powerful. He created the entire universe, which is billions of light years across, and it was a huge explosion with a lot of power. And two, he wanted us to exist. This at least points to deism. Maybe leans a little bit towards theism in that he wanted us to exist, but at least deism. Now let's go through beauty. Now, pretty much everyone will recognize that the universe is beautiful, Earth is beautiful, and life is beautiful. Whether it be nebulas, galaxies, reefs, snowy mountains, flowers, forests, dogs. A lot of dogs are cute, but they're also more than cute in that we see them as beautiful. Now, beauty suggests intent. Now, human creations are rarely beautiful without intent. But even with intent, they're still usually not beautiful. Think of a child making a Mother's Day card for his mom. The intent might be beautiful and pure, but it's not actually beautiful, the card itself. Let's just be honest. I wrote cards and they're not beautiful. I've seen them. This suggests that beauty is the result of intent, and therefore we can branch this out and say the universe, Earth, and life are the result, are beautiful, and therefore they have intent, and intent only comes from a mind. Therefore, beauty and the beauty in the universe, Earth, and life come from a mind. Now we have to ask, is beauty objective? Because if it's not objective and subjective, then anything can be beautiful and therefore doesn't really need a mind. But there's still other ways we can get around that, but I won't get into that in this video. So objective means that it is an inherent property, meaning something is beautiful in and of itself. Subjective means that it is up for opinion, or in the eye of the beholder, as people say. Now here's the thing. Virtually all people recognize nature as beautiful, surpassing all cultural boundaries. This suggests that it's not in the eye of the beholder, because if it was in the eye of the beholder, it would be according to culture, but it crosses all cultural boundaries. You can go anywhere and they'll say, yes, reefs are beautiful. Animals are beautiful. Forests, snowy mountains, nebulas, show a picture of a nebula, they'll be like, yeah, that's beautiful. And the reason is because it is objective. It's also interdisciplinary in that it applies to music, it applies to art, it applies to reading books, it applies to many things. And it also takes practice to achieve, suggesting it is objective and not just in the eye of the beholder. Now, most philosophers actually taken beauty to be objective to a couple hundred years ago, which is why I'm skeptical of that idea. I'm skeptical of many just modern ideas, because I don't think the ancients were stupid, And actually, even atheist philosophers like, I think his name's Paul Davies, he said that this is better explained by a theistic worldview. Now, he's still an atheist, thinks that there's other arguments that outweigh this argument, but even atheists acknowledge that this is a good argument. Now, what of God's character can we get from this? One, he's personal, meaning he's a person. He can make choices because there's a mind. Two, he's creative. I mean, look at everything. Nebulas, reefs, forests, whatever. It's very creative. And two, he's involved because he created the universe. He stepped in, created Earth, and then stepped in and created life. Next, we're going to go to rationality and coherence. Now, Eugene Wigner, he's a Nobel Prize winner, and he was actually an atheist, not a Christian. And he said, quote, "The enormous usefulness of mathematics and the natural sciences is something bordering on the mysterious, and there is no rational explanation for it." He goes on to call it a miracle, actually, though he doesn't, of course, think it was supernatural. Now, the universe literally exploded into existence. So what would we expect? Chaos or order? This is why he acknowledged that it is very mysterious and miraculous. Because if something exploded into being, we would expect chaos. But instead, we got physics and orderly mathematical coherence. Since the universe is rationally and coherently made, it suggests that there's a rational being behind it. So what can we get about God's character from this? One, he's intelligent. I mean, if you look at physics, if it takes an intelligent person to discover the physical laws and then the equations behind them, how much more did the one who created those laws have to be intelligent? Second, he's ordered, and third, he is rational. So he's not just some whimsical god of the Greeks. He is a very ordered and rational god. Now we go to the argument from motion. This is Thomas Aquinas' fifth way, and it's taken from Aristotle, actually. And it's kind of cheating because it's not necessarily nature, but it's an observation about reality. Now, motion refers to change, and I'll explain that in a second. Everything that is changed by something else. So, for example, a ball moves because of a stick, and the stick was held by a hand who moved it. Now, the hand is part of a body, which is part of a person, which came from what? The parents, which came from ancestors, which came from what? Let's just assume evolution is true and it goes through all the lineage. Well, then what does it go back to? Well, let's just assume chemical reactions. Let's just assume that for the sake of the argument. Okay, well, those chemical reactions came from elements. Those elements came from the Big Bang, which came from what? Let's say a multiverse, which came from what? And we're going to keep going back until we get something. Now, people have argued, why can't there just be an infinite amount of changes? Can this simply go on forever? No. And the reason is because there's no first cause. Now, if there is an infinite change behind today, or this change, or any change, a new change would never come. So think of it this way. If there's an infinite number, and then plus 1, will that plus 1 ever come? No. Because the plus 1 is after literally infinity, which never ends. Now, if there's infinite changes behind today, and this change, that's happening right now on your screen, then this would be the plus 1. And if this is a plus 1, it can never come. However, there are changes now. Therefore, it cannot be infinite. Now, there must be a first term, and that first cause is not caused by something else, meaning it has to be eternal. So this uncaused first cause, or unchanged changer, an unmoved mover, is called God. Now, what characteristics can we get from this? 1, he must be eternal, because it can't be caused by something else, or else that thing would have to have a cause as well, or that thing would have to, the ultimate cause must be eternal. It must be the first cause. And lastly, it must be alone. It makes no sense to say that there were multiple uncaused causers. That doesn't really make sense. How could multiple be uncaused and then all cause simultaneously? It just doesn't make sense. So he was probably alone, plus Occam's razor. Now for a bonus, I'm going to give a bonus on all these. There's overdesigned. This was formulated best by Steve Loffman and Howard Glicksman in their book, Your Design Body. It was only a short part of it, but it was still best formulated by them. And their argument's basically, what benefit does laughing have for survival? How about creativity, sweet taste, even morals? They aren't needed for survival, as many animals don't even need them. I have a bearded dragon. He's not creative, just being honest. Well, he can be a little creative in that he's deceitful and he tries to do things he's not supposed to do. But nonetheless, he also doesn't have morals. In fact, I was told when I was researching him, if I were to breed them, I wanted to breed them at one point. But nonetheless, if you were to breed them, you have to separate the babies from them because they will eat the babies. That's not very moral, but he's an animal. They don't have morals. So, why do we have them? It seems like we were over-designed in the sense that we were created not only to survive, but to thrive and enjoy life. Now, Darwinism only explains why we have what we need to survive. It does not explain anything beyond that. So I would suggest that there's a creator. And now, what can we know about this creator? 1, he's loving. He wants us to enjoy things. That's a loving thing to do. And 2, he's involved. He created everything, and therefore he's involved, including life and us. So what can we learn from nature? 1, there is only one eternal creator, or cause. 2, he is rational, ordered, and personal, meaning he can make decisions. 3, he is powerful. 4, he is intelligent, creative, and skilled in what he does. And lastly, he wanted us to exist, and is involved with his creation, and loves it. That sounds a lot like a theistic God. In fact, that's the definition of a theistic God. So what about divine hiddenness? People have asked, why has God hidden himself? In fact, I heard Alex O'Connor in a video once saying, why can he only be found when looking at DNA in cells? Okay, well, let's just be honest. Throughout history, people have looked at nature and seen a creator. Whether it be the ancient Greeks, the Romans, the Hindus, or anybody. We looked at nature and we were like, yeah, this has to have a creator. So obviously it's not hidden to the microscope. I mean, specified complexity kind of is, but you look at beauty, you don't need to be a scientist to see beauty. Rationality and coherence, you don't need to be a scientist to understand that. Or even cause and effect. That's just obvious. Ancient philosophers figured that out in Greece. Now, the deeper you look, the more you will find God, which is why there's more evidence for God now than there was before, now that we have microscopes and telescopes even. So I wanted to end on a quote from Louis, I think his name is Pasteur, but as I said in one of my previous videos, never trust me on pronunciations. A little science distances you from God, but a lot of science brings you closer to Him. Now, if you have any questions or any observations that you would like to make, please comment and let me know, and let's have a discussion below. Thank you.